Welcome to another spine-chilling episode of Dark Forces by Skoob. I'm your host, Nile Cross, and today we're diving deep into one of America's most controversial and feared objects, the Ouija board. What started as a simple parlor game has become synonymous with demonic possession, tragic murders, and unexplained phenomena that have haunted families for over a century. Tonight, we'll explore how a Baltimore novelty item transformed into a cultural phenomenon that would inspire The Exorcist, influence major court cases, and allegedly drive ordinary people to commit unspeakable acts. From its innocent beginnings in 1891 to the terrifying real-life stories that continue to emerge today, prepare yourself for a journey into the darkest corners of American supernatural folklore. But be warned, the stories you're about to hear are not for the faint of heart. Picture this: Baltimore, 1891. The Industrial Revolution is in full swing, spiritualism is sweeping across America, and a group of businessmen are about to unleash something that will terrify and fascinate generations to come. The patent was granted, and newspapers began running advertisements for Ouija, the wonderful talking board. What happened next was nothing short of extraordinary. By 1892, just 1 year later, the Kennard Novelty Company had exploded from a single Baltimore factory to 7 factories spanning Baltimore, New York, Chicago, and even London. But success breeds corruption, and money changes everything. Within that same year, 2 of the original 4 founders, Charles Kennard and Elijah Bond, were forced out due to financial disputes. The very board that promised to communicate with peaceful spirits had already torn apart its creators through greed and betrayal. Enter William Fuld, a man whose name would become forever linked with the Ouija board's legacy. Starting as a mere employee and stockholder, Fuld maneuvered his way to power. By 1898, with backing from majority shareholder Harry Bowie, Fuld secured exclusive manufacturing rights. The ousted founders tried desperately to create rival spirit boards, but the public remained captivated by the original. Here's where the story takes a dark turn. Though Fuld never invented the Ouija board, he proclaimed himself its founder, a lie that would follow him to his grave. And what a grave it was. In 1927, William Fuld met his end in a bizarre accident, falling from the roof of his 3-story company building. Some say it was just an accident. Others whispered that the spirits had claimed their revenge. The board's influence was already attracting dangerous attention. The infamous occultist Aleister Crowley, a man known for rituals involving cat blood consumption, became fascinated with the board's potential. In 1919, he contemplated creating his own elaborate version. Thank God it never materialized, because knowing Crowley's reputation for summoning malevolent entities, his version could have unleashed horrors beyond imagination. What made the Ouija board truly terrifying wasn't just its alleged supernatural powers, it was its accessibility. For the first time in history, anyone could attempt to communicate with the dead without a trained medium present to control or protect them. Traditional spiritualist mediums were terrified, but not for the reasons you might think. They weren't afraid of demons. They were afraid of losing business. The Ouija board threatened to put them out of work entirely. A professional seance might cost a fortune, but a Ouija board could be purchased for just a few dollars. The marketing was brilliant and sinister. Advertisements showed families gathered around the board near warm hearth fires, couples seeking answers about romance, and grieving relatives hoping to contact loved ones lost in World War I. The board promised to answer life's most pressing questions. Does he love me? Who will I marry? Are my deceased relatives at peace? But here's what the advertisements didn't mention. When you open a door to the spirit world without proper protection or guidance, you never know what might walk through. From its very inception, newspaper reports began surfacing of people blaming the Ouija board for driving them to insanity, theft, and even murder. Religious leaders denounced it as evil, warning that spirits should transition to the afterlife, not linger on Earth waiting to be summoned by parlor game sessions. The warnings only made it more popular. In 1966, Parker Brothers acquired the rights, transforming the Ouija board from a spiritualist tool into a mainstream board game. By 1967, it had become the best-selling board game in America, surpassing even Monopoly. When Hasbro acquired Parker Brothers in 1991, they repositioned it as pure entertainment. But you can't rebrand the supernatural. You can't trademark terror. The line between parlor game and paranormal conduit blurred dangerously when the Ouija board began appearing in actual criminal cases. These weren't urban legends or campfire stories. These were real crimes with real victims, and the Ouija board was playing a starring role. Let's start with 1920 New York City. Gambler Joseph Burton Elwell was found murdered in his home, and the case captivated the nation. Desperate for answers, people turned to Ouija boards, hoping to communicate with Elwell's spirit and solve the mystery. Instead of helpful clues, law enforcement found themselves drowning in superstitious nonsense and false leads generated by well-meaning amateur spiritualists. The following year brought an even more disturbing case. The New York Times reported on a Chicago woman committed to a psychiatric institution. Her crime? Following instructions she claimed to receive from Ouija spirits, she left her deceased mother's body in the living room for 15 days before burying it in the backyard. When questioned about her sanity, she insisted she wasn't mad. She was just following orders from the other side. By 1930, Buffalo, New York faced a chilling case involving two women who allegedly committed murder under the influence of messages received via Ouija board. The psychological manipulation was becoming clear. Vulnerable individuals were interpreting random board movements as divine or spiritual commands to commit heinous acts. Even the U.S. Army wasn't immune. In 1941, a 23-year-old gas station attendant from New Jersey told the New York Times that his decision to enlist was prompted by guidance from his Ouija board. Young men were literally letting a board game determine their fate in wartime. But perhaps the most shocking case came in 1994 in Britain. Stephen Young, an insurance broker, was convicted for the brutal murders of Harry and Nicola Fuller. During deliberations, the jury, tasked with determining Young's fate, secretly used a Ouija board to communicate with the victims. The board allegedly revealed Young's guilt, leading to his conviction. When this was discovered, it caused such controversy that a retrial was ordered. The very tool meant to seek truth had corrupted the justice system itself. Everything changed in 1973 with the release of The Exorcist. The film's iconic opening, young Regan McNeil innocently playing with a Ouija board before becoming demonically possessed, cemented the board's reputation as a gateway to hell in the American consciousness. But the movie's impact went far beyond entertainment. It created a template that real-life tragedies would follow, with horrifying accuracy. In December 2008, the quiet community of Benton City was shattered by a double murder that seemed ripped from the film's script. Joshua Tucker, a 16-year-old boy, was accused of brutally killing 13-year-old Elizabeth Shacklin and her mother, Ellen Laurie Shacklin. What made this case particularly disturbing were the details that emerged. Tucker's mother, Shannon Harrington, revealed that her son had been communicating with Satan through a Ouija board in the days before the murders. She claimed Tucker had engaged in a 45-minute conversation with the devil, resulting in his possession. Witnesses described Tucker as being in a trance-like state during the killings, reportedly observing himself from above as if watching someone else commit the crimes. It was like Satan was using his hands, Harrington insisted, convinced that her son had become a vessel for malevolent forces. This wasn't isolated to fiction or distant history. This was 2008 in modern America, where a teenage boy allegedly murdered two innocent people after consulting a board game. The pattern was becoming undeniable. Vulnerable individuals, often young people, would use the Ouija board seeking answers or excitement, only to become convinced they were receiving communications from powerful entities commanding them to commit terrible acts. But the Ouija board's influence extended beyond crime into the world of literature, creating some of the most celebrated and controversial works in American letters. In 1916, Mrs. Pearl Curran claimed her poetry and narratives were inspired by the spirit of a 17th-century Englishwoman named Patience Worth, communicated through the Ouija board. Her work gained significant acclaim, encouraging others to attempt similar spiritual collaborations. The following year, Emily Grant Hutchings published her novel, Jap Heron, asserting it was dictated by the spirit of Mark Twain through a Ouija board. While the book didn't achieve widespread success, it demonstrated how the board was being used as a creative catalyst, or creative crutch. The most significant literary achievement came in 1982 when acclaimed poet James Merrill published The Changing Light at Sandover. This epic poem, which Merrill claimed was dictated by spirits via Ouija board, won the prestigious National Book Critics Circle Award. However, Merrill took a more pragmatic view, suggesting the board primarily amplified his own creative thoughts, rather than serving as a direct channel to the otherworldly. But here's the disturbing question. If the board could inspire award-winning poetry, what else might it inspire? If it could channel creativity, could it also channel violence, obsession, or madness? Now we turn to one of the most unsettling personal accounts on record, the story of Maria, whose experience with a Ouija board transformed from innocent curiosity into a nightmare of supernatural obsession and physical torment. Maria's relationship with the board began typically enough, but quickly evolved into something deeply disturbing. The entity communicating through the board grew possessive, expressing love for Maria and demanding she kiss the board's surface every night before sleep. The supernatural jealousy manifested physically. When Maria's husband Roy attempted intimacy, an invisible force would intervene, slapping him with an unseen hand, violently turning his head. When Maria's thoughts wandered to other men, she herself would receive sudden, painful slaps from this jealous entity. The nights became a torment of whispered voices calling her name, sometimes Maria, sometimes Rose. The board's call was persistent and irresistible, compelling her to engage in session after session. She found herself forming an unhealthy attachment to the entity, spending hours in communication while her real-world relationships deteriorated. When Maria finally recognized the danger and turned to her faith, seeking solace in the Bible and prayer, the entity's response was swift and vicious. It claimed her deceased mother was disappointed in her, that she had ruined its plans. The room filled with the stomach-churning stench of human waste that no amount of cleaning could eliminate. Determined to break free, Maria took the board outside and doused it in gasoline, attempting to burn it. Remarkably, the board remained unscathed until she battered it against a stone wall. Only when it was physically destroyed could it finally be set ablaze. But the entity's revenge was immediate and brutal. Maria experienced 3 days and nights of excruciating heat, as though trapped in an inferno. Her skin turned fiery red and tight. Her veins bulged as if ready to burst. She found herself paralyzed, unable even to pray for relief. Even after destroying the board, new entities appeared. Maria began seeing a mysterious woman with an unsettling laugh in her home. When she sought help from her priest, requesting a blessing for her house, the religious intervention seemed only to escalate the paranormal activity rather than stop it. Maria's story demonstrates how the Ouija board can evolve from a simple communication tool into something that completely takes over a person's life, isolating them from loved ones and creating an obsessive, destructive relationship with unknown entities. Perhaps no case illustrates the board's power to corrupt and destroy young lives more clearly than the story of Stacy. a vibrant teenager whose 4-month relationship with a Ouija board transformed her from a healthy, happy girl into something her own mother no longer recognized. Stacy had always been known for her love of food and robust appetite. Whether at McDonald's or upscale restaurants, she savored every meal, blessed with a metabolism that kept her slender despite her hearty eating habits. Her bright blue eyes sparkled with life and mischief. But 4 months after introducing a Ouija board into her life, everything changed. Friends noticed how she now picked at her food, barely eating. Her once sparkling eyes had dulled, as though a light within her had been extinguished. The transformation was so dramatic that teachers, counselors, and family members all tried desperately to understand what had happened to the girl they once knew. The first sign something was seriously wrong came through sounds emanating from Stacy's room. Her mother began hearing disturbing noises, not music, but something far more unsettling. "It was as if I was overhearing the intimate sounds of people making love," she later confessed. Initially, Stacy's father, a logical doctor, dismissed the sounds as singing along to music tapes, but the noises were too consistent, too strange to be explained away so simply. When Stacy's younger brother began reacting suggestively to the sounds, her mother knew she had to investigate. What she found was shocking. Stacy lay alone on her bed with headphones, but the changes in her appearance were undeniable. Dramatic weight loss, dark circles under her eyes, and fingernails bitten so severely they bled. Then her mother noticed the Ouija board. As someone raised in a strict Catholic background, Stacy's mother instinctively felt the board exuded something sinister. When she questioned Stacy about its presence, she received a curt response that it was none of her business, completely out of character for her normally respectful daughter. When her mother reached for the board, Stacy's reaction was violent and disturbing. She slapped her mother's hand away, then grabbed her arm with supernatural strength that caused genuine pain. For the first time in her daughter's life, Stacy's mother felt genuine fear of her own child. The final image is perhaps the most haunting. Stacy following her tearful mother out of the room, clutching the Ouija board to her chest like a protective mother would hold an infant. The board had become more important to her than her own family. In just 4 months, the Ouija board had transformed a healthy, happy teenager into someone who chose an inanimate object over her mother's love. The question that haunts every parent who hears this story: what entity had taken residence in that board? And what was it doing to Stacy during those long nights of communication? We close tonight's descent into Ouija board horrors with a question: is it real, or only the mind's darkest trick? Skeptics point to the ideomotor effect, unconscious muscle movement, yet the stories we heard, Stacy's change, Maria's obsession, Joshua Tucker's violence show how belief alone can destroy lives. Even if the board is wood and plastic, its power as a psychological trigger is undeniable. Want to know what happened on Stacy's final night, or the voice Maria swore she heard for 3 days? Hear the full, uncut accounts. They're darker than you think. Download Skoob app now to get access to the full story. Until next time, keep your lights on and your boards put away. This has been Nile Cross.